Revelation chapter 12 verses 1 to 5. A great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant, and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven. An enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter, and her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. Many Bible scholars interpret the sign of Revelation 12 as a heavenly reenactment of the birth of Christ and the subsequent persecution that he and many innocent children his age went through from the merciless King Herod. However, there are many difficulties for accepting this kind of interpretation. For one, Christ was not snatched up to God and to his throne right after his birth, nor did he rule the nations with an iron scepter soon afterwards, while he was still a newborn child. In contrast, a prophecy from the book of Psalm specifically talks about a Lord whose coming to power will happen during his childhood while he is still fresh from the dew of his youth. Psalm 110 verses 1 to 3. The Lord said unto my Lord, Sit thou at my right hand, until I make thine enemies thy footstool. The Lord shall send the rod of thy strength out of Zion. Rule thou in the midst of thine enemies. Thy people shall be willing in the day of thy power, in the beauties of holiness from the womb of the morning. Thou hast the dew of thy youth. Hebrew, Yaldut. According to Strong's Concordance, the Hebrew word Yaldut means childhood or youth. The prophet Isaiah also talks about this royal child who will pasture, lead, and tame all the animals in God's holy mountain. Isaiah chapter 11 verses 6 to 9. The wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the young goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Finally, Jacob also prophesied that this future little child prince, whom he called Shiloh, will be riding a foal or a donkey's colt, which is of course a young animal under 1 year old that can be safely ridden only by a child. Genesis chapter 49 verses 10 to 12. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be, binding his foal unto the vine, and his ass's colt unto the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall be red with wine, and his teeth white with milk. Take note that Shiloh will still be drinking milk when he comes to claim Judah's scepter, and that his face and garments will be regularly washed in wine, and this explains the child's prominent white teeth and red eyes that was described in this prophecy by Jacob. It is interesting to mention that the practice of dipping male infants into a bath of wine was also practiced by the ancient Spartans, and that they did this to test their newborn infants' strength and fortitude. These Spartans believed that a weak child bathed in wine would immediately convulse and die. while those that survive will be hardened and strengthened by it. Christ was fully aware of the coming of this little prince as well, and even made provision for this child prince when he took along the colt of the donkey he was riding on his way to Jerusalem. Matthew chapter 21 verses 1 to 5. As they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there, with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away." This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. "Say to daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The adult donkey was meant for Christ, while the young colt or foal of the donkey was meant for the child prince who wasn't even born yet at that time. Who could this future child prince be that he deserves to ride side by side with Christ? And how can such a young child be capable of ruling the nations with an iron rod? Is there any person prophesied in the Bible who will be another one like Christ? The answer is yes, and I believe this child will be the other advocate or paraclete whom Christ promised to send to his disciples. John chapter 14 verses 15 to 17 and verse 26. "If you love me, keep my commands, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. The world cannot accept him, because it neither sees him nor knows him. But you know him, for he lives with you and will be in you. But the Advocate, the Holy Spirit whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and will remind you of everything I have said to you." This other Advocate, Greek Parakletos, is of course the Holy Spirit, whom I believe will appear in the last days as a young child, and as a separate being, and not merely someone that dwells within someone else's body like it always did in the past. 1 Corinthians chapter 3 verse 16. "Do you not know that you are a temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you?" Now the Greek word parakletos means someone who pleads another's cause before a judge, that is, an advocate or an intercessor. In my previous video titled, "Why Are There Animal Sacrifices in Ezekiel's Millennial Temple?" I mentioned that the Holy Spirit intercedes for all those sealed with it and whom he dwells in. Romans chapter 8 verse 23 and verses 26 to 27. "We ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. And He who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God." However, I also mentioned in the previous video that not everyone who are saved by the blood of Christ will be sealed with the Holy Spirit. In fact, the Bible tells us that there will be only 144,000 sealed, and they all belong from the 12 tribes of Israel. Revelation chapter 7 verses 2 to 4. "Then I saw another angel coming up from the east, having the seal of the living God. He called out in a loud voice to the four angels who had been given power to harm the land and the sea. 'Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God.' Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel." Ephesians chapter 1 verses 13 to 14. And you also were included in Christ when you heard the message of truth, the gospel of your salvation. When you believed, you were marked in him with a seal, the promised Holy Spirit, who is a deposit guaranteeing our inheritance until the redemption of those who are God's possession. The book of Revelation tells us that there will be countless numbers of people who will be saved by the blood of the Lamb, but will not be included among the 144,000 that will be sealed with the Holy Spirit. Revelation chapter 7 verses 9 to 14. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands, and they cried out in a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb." Then one of the elders asked me, "These in white robes, who are they and where did they come from?" I answered, "Sir, you know." And he said, "These are they who have come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." Thus, the number of people whose bodies the Holy Spirit can dwell in has been limited to 144,000 only. And to these 144,000, the Holy Spirit becomes their personal intercessor or advocate. But for the rest of the countless multitudes who will be saved by the blood of Christ and are not part of the 144,000, the Holy Spirit can also become their intercessor. However, he can only do so as a separate being and outside their bodies. And this is why the Holy Spirit needs to be born as a young child. In order for the child prince to act as another intercessor or advocate just like Christ, the child prince must also function as high priest as well. Zechariah chapter 6, verses 9 to 13. The word of the Lord came to me. Take silver and gold from the exiles Heldai, Tobiah, and Jedaiah, who have arrived from Babylon. Go the same day to the house of Josiah son of Zephaniah. Take the silver and gold and make a crown, and set it on the head of the high priest Joshua son of Jozadak. Tell him this is what the Lord Almighty says. Here is the man whose name is the branch, and he will branch out from his place and build the temple of the Lord. It is he who will build the temple of the Lord, and he will be clothed with majesty, and will sit and rule on his throne, and he will be a priest on his throne, and there will be harmony between the two. The book of Zechariah makes it clear that the high priest Joshua is only symbolic of this future prince and high priest, whom God also calls the branch. Zechariah chapter 3 verses 8 to 9. Listen, high priest Joshua, you and your associates seated before you, who are men symbolic of things to come. I am going to bring my servant the branch. See, the stone I have set in front of Joshua. There are 7 eyes on that one stone, and I will engrave an inscription on it, says the Lord Almighty, and I will remove the sin of this land in a single day. Now many will object and say that Christ is this prophesied branch, and not the Holy Spirit. However, if you examine closely all the prophecies regarding the branch, you will see that 2 branches, and not just one, are always referred to. Isaiah chapter 11 verses 1 to 2. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. Note that the rod coming forth out of the stem or trunk of Jesse is different from the branch that grows out of his roots, since the rod and the branch appeared on 2 different parts of the tree, namely the stem and the roots. The stem is by definition the main body or stalk of a plant or shrub, typically rising above the ground. The root, on the other hand, is by definition the part of a plant that attaches it to the ground or to a support, typically underground. Therefore, this prophecy by Isaiah applies equally to both the rod and the branch, which symbolize Christ and the Holy Spirit respectively. Genesis chapter 49 verses 10 to 11. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs, Hebrew Shiloh, shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. Now notice that there are two possessions of Judah that were mentioned in this prophecy, namely his scepter, Hebrew shaibet, and his ruler's staff, Hebrew chawkak. Furthermore, the Hebrew word chawkak can also mean to trace or mark out, and it is quite similar to the Hebrew word chawtam, which means putting a mark or a seal. Thus, the two possessions of Judah, which will be claimed by Shiloh, are really two entirely different things, namely his scepter and his seal, and they are not just two different words referring to the same object. Also, two animals were mentioned in this Bible verse as well, namely the donkey tethered to a vine and the colt tethered to the choicest branch. Now Christ differentiates between the vine and the branch. John chapter 15 verse 5. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. This means that the prophecy about Shiloh, who will gain the obedience of the nations, equally apply to both Christ, who rides the donkey tethered to the vine, and to the Holy Spirit, who rides the colt tethered to the branch. So when will the sign of Revelation 12 be fulfilled? The sign that portends the birth of the Holy Spirit as a separate being and as the other paraclete promised by Christ. Revelation chapter 12 verse 1. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. The great heavenly sign of Revelation 12 is an astronomical sign to help us determine the month and day of this special event. The woman refers to the constellation Virgo, and the sun clothing the woman with the moon under her feet signifies the new moon occurring at the constellation Virgo. The word Virgo is Latin for virgin. However, this word is also probably related to another Latin word virga, which means a young shoot or twig. And this is why Virgo is often drawn with a staff or rod in her right hand and an ear of wheat in her left hand. I interpret the rod and ear of wheat, which Virgo holds in her hands, as representations of the prophesied rod and branch of Jesse. And this is because I also believe that Virgo represents the Jerusalem that is above, mentioned by Apostle Paul, and which according to him is really the new covenant mediated by Christ and sealed with the Holy Spirit. Galatians chapter 4 verses 22 to 27. For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by the slave woman and the other by the free woman. His son by the slave woman was born according to the flesh, but his son by the free woman was born as the result of a divine promise. These things are being taken figuratively. The women represent two covenants. One covenant is from Mount Sinai and bears children who are to be slaves. This is Hagar. Now Hagar stands for Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds with the present city of Jerusalem, because she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem that is above is free, and she is our mother. For it is written, Be glad, barren woman, you who never bore a child. Shout for joy and cry aloud, you who were never in labor, because more are the children of the desolate woman than of her who has a husband. Now Spica is the brightest star in the constellation Virgo, and its name derives from Latin, which means ear of wheat grain. And this explains why this brilliant white star marks the ear of wheat shown in the Virgin's left hand. Spica is a massive star with more than 10 times the mass of the Sun and 7 times the Sun's radius. It also has a total luminosity which is about 12,100 times that of the Sun. At only 240 light-years distance, Spica is one of the nearest stars to the Sun that has enough mass to end its life in a massive supernova explosion. And when it does, it will possibly become brighter than the full moon and would also be seen in broad daylight for several weeks. In the book of Numbers, there is a prophecy about a star that will come out or march out of its place. Numbers chapter 24 verse 17. I see him but not now. I behold him but not near. A star will come out of Jacob, a scepter will rise out of Israel. Is Revelation 12 telling us that Spica will explode into a supernova soon at the time when the new moon is located at Virgo? I actually think so, and if I am right, then in the Hebrew calendar, this event will most likely take place during Rosh Hashanah, which is also the first day of the Hebrew month Tishri. Rosh Hashanah means head of the year, and on this day, all inhabitants of the world pass before God like a flock of sheep under his rod. And as they do so, God decrees in the heavenly court who among them shall live and who shall die, who shall be impoverished and who shall be enriched, and who shall fall and who shall rise. Rosh Hashanah is also a joyous day when God is proclaimed King of the universe by all those who worship him in heaven and on earth. It is therefore appropriate that the birth of the other Paraclete like Christ should happen on this special day, because this is the time when the newborn child is caught up onto God's throne so that he can rule all nations as king and shepherd all of them with his iron rod just like God. Revelation chapter 12 verse 5. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. According to Jewish tradition, God inscribes each person's fate for the coming year into a book, the Book of Life, at the start of Rosh Hashanah, and waits 10 days later until the end of Yom Kippur to seal the verdict. Yom Kippur, also known as the Day of Atonement, is the holiest day of the year in Judaism, and it is celebrated on the 10th day of Tishri. Its central themes are atonement and repentance. Jewish people traditionally observe this holy day with an approximate 25-hour period of fasting and intensive prayer, often spending most of the day in synagogue services. Because of this, I believe the sealing of the 144,000 will start right after the whole day fasting of Yom Kippur ends. Revelation chapter 7 verses 1 to 4. After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth to prevent any wind from blowing on the land or on the sea or on any tree. Then I saw another angel coming up from the east, having the seal of the living God. He called out in a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm the land and the sea. Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put the seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God. Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. The 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth will be sealing only those that will undergo and survive the 10 days persecution that I believe will happen between the start of Rosh Hashanah and the end of Yom Kippur. Revelation chapter 2 verse 10. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. I believe the sealing or harvesting of the 144,000 in Israel will last for exactly 4 days, starting from the evening of Tishri 10 and ending just before Sukkot starts on the evening of Tishri 14. This is because Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, marks the end of the harvest time and of the agricultural year in the land of Israel. So this day should also mark the end of the sealing of the 144,000. This also means that each one of the four angels doing the harvesting will be given just one whole day to take hold of the seal of God exclusively to himself, in order that he can seal those of the 144,000 that he will find at his corner of the earth. Now what happens immediately after the sealing of the 144,000 in the land of Israel is finished on the evening of Tishri 14? In the book of Revelation, we are told that an angelic king named Abaddon or Apollyon will descend from the sky to lead an army of supernatural locusts which he will release from the abyss, in order that they can torture all those that were not sealed on their foreheads by the four angels. Revelation chapter 9 verses 1 to 6 and verse 11. The fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss. And out of the smoke, locusts came down on the earth, and were given power like that of scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree, but only those people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were not allowed to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. And the agony they suffered was like that of the sting of a scorpion when it strikes. During those days, people will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. They had as king over them the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek is Apollyon, that is, destroyer. The angelic king Abaddon will release his army of supernatural locusts from the abyss on the evening of the 14th day of the 7th Hebrew month Tishri. And this means the 5 months torture by Abaddon and his army should end just before the evening of the 14th day of the 12th Hebrew month Adar. Now the 14th of Adar is also when the festival of Purim is celebrated. It is a day of feasting and rejoicing that commemorates Israel's deliverance from its enemies. In my previous video titled, Who are the two witnesses and when will the third temple be built? I mentioned that Daniel's 62 weeks, during which the walls and the third temple in Jerusalem will be rebuilt, will start on February 27, 2021, and that this date happens to be the 14th of Adar for that year as well. This means that the end of the 5 months torture by Abaddon's locust army and the start of the rebuilding work in Jerusalem will both take place on the same Hebrew date, namely the 14th day of Adar. Now, if this is not just a mere coincidence and is really intended for by divine providence, then this must mean that both events should also take place on the same year, namely 2021. If we now trace back the events that will happen before Adar 14, 2021, we can see that the start of the 5 months torture by Abaddon and his army should be on the evening of Tishri 14, 2020, which is also October 2, 2020 in our calendar. 4 days before the evening of Tishri 14, or on the evening of Tishri 10, 2020, which is also September 28, 2020 in our calendar, the four angels standing at the four corners of the earth will start sealing the 144,000 from the 12 tribes of Israel. 10 days before the evening of Tishri 10, or on the evening of Rosh Hashanah 2020, which is also September 18, 2020 in our calendar, the 10 days persecution by Satan on the rest of the woman's offspring will start, and this will happen right after the male child of Revelation 12 is born by the woman on the same evening. Revelation chapter 12, verses 13 and 17. When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus. Revelation chapter 2 verse 10. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. Now who is this angelic king named Abaddon or Apollyon? Why will he torture those who did not receive the seal of God on their foreheads? And why exactly after 5 months of torturing these people, the rebuilding of the walls and the third temple in Jerusalem will start? I will be answering all of these questions in my next blog.